Hello, veterinary friends. Welcome to the podcast. Today, I have a very special guest for you. Her name is Dr. Michelle Harcha, and she received her DVM degree from The Ohio State University. She's a board certified coach and an ICF Associate Certified Coach. She practiced small animal medicine, worked for Hill's Pet Nutrition, and was the director of professional development education at The Ohio State University College of Veterinary Medicine. She currently owns LeadYourShip, a consulting, speaking, and coaching company that specializes in teaching leadership, communication, well-being, and emotional intelligence in the veterinary profession. She's the current president-elect of the Ohio Veterinary Medical Association. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And she lives in Columbus, Ohio with her yellow lab, Colby. Welcome to the podcast, Michelle. I love your bio. It's so accomplished, and I'm delighted to have you here.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the invitation to join your podcast today.
Yeah, I'm really excited. So we're going to learn a lot today, I think, from you. So my first question is always to every person on the podcast is to tell me their veterinary story. So you can start from wherever you want and tell me as much or as little as you want.
Sure. I'll start at the age of 13 because when I was 13 years old, that's the year that I decided to become a veterinarian. And there were three things that happened that were critical that year. The first thing, for my birthday, I got a horse, an American saddlebred horse.
Nice.
And then 2 weeks later, my dog Bimbo, who was a basset hound, died. And Bimbo was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. My parents would drive us from our hometown 2 hours north to Columbus to be treated with radiation at the Ohio State University College of Veterinary Medicine.
Nice.
When she passed 2 weeks after I got my horse, I can remember sitting up in a tree looking up to the sky saying, Bimbo, I will one day find a cure for cancer and go to veterinary school.
Wow.
And then 2 weeks after that, my grandfather died. My grandfather was a veterinarian as well, and he graduated from Ohio State in the class of 1922. He was primarily large animal and worked for USDA APHIS in West Virginia. He told my mom when I was a young child that I would be a veterinarian one day. And I remember thinking, I'm going to find a cure for cancer and continue the legacy of my grandfather.
Wow. That's big for a 13-year-old to think like that.
Mm-hmm.
You must have been a mature 13-year-old.
I must have been.
Yeah. So you were hell-bent on going to Ohio State and becoming a vet. You never turned back.
No. When I started out at Ohio State, I wanted to be a mixed animal veterinarian and return to my hometown of Portsmouth, Ohio. Then by the second year, I was definitely going to be an equine veterinarian. And then my senior year, in a small animal rotation, I thought, well, this is really interesting, and decided to do small animal equine. My first practice, the equine didn't happen. I was recruited to work at the Emergency Veterinary Clinic of Cincinnati and absolutely loved that. So did emergency medicine for probably about 10 years, about 9 years. Went back into private practice, working two practices that were both up for sale. At that time, I was not sure I wanted to buy a practice. I was recruited by Hill's Pet Nutrition. I thought I could do this for 1 year. And boy, I loved teaching and learning. I had the opportunity to do some international travel in Asian countries, introducing new products. I love that. I love to teach. I love to travel. And what I liked most about my job really was working with veterinary students. I covered Michigan State University, Purdue, Pennsylvania, and Ohio State. And sure enough, 12 years later, I was offered the position to teach at Ohio State in the College of Veterinary Medicine, my dream job. And honestly, every job has been my dream job until it's not. And I always tell my coachees that it's okay if you're not happy in your job, move on. It's your dream job when you join it. And if it's not anymore, let it become somebody else's dream job. And I've always felt that way, to always move towards what I'm passionate about. And in 2017, I left Ohio State to start my own company to take what I'd learned all throughout my career and go to veterinary practices. And during the pandemic, I learned that you could become credentialed in coaching. I had no idea. I said I was a
Yeah.
coach when I left, and Dr. Jeff Thorne taught me that there was credentialing coaching and classes that you could take. And well, during the pandemic, I got my credentials. And now, as part of my business, I speak, I consult, and I also coach. And
That's
that's,
amazing. Yeah. I love that you said it's your dream job until it's not. Because I think so many of us, when we're kids, we always want to be a veterinarian. And so we become one. But then when we start working, we're like, oh, is this where it ends? And I think that's really difficult for a lot of people to then dream again and dream again and dream again because they spent so much of their life just wanting this one goal. And it seems strange to then change that goal after so many years of wanting it. And it is, I think, one of the reasons that so many veterinarians now need life coaching and need coaches because they need to figure that out, that there can be other dream jobs, like you said.
yes, and have a guide by the side that can help you navigate those challenges of being the person you came here to be versus what your family might think you need to be or
Mm,
friends think you need
yes.
to be. That's not always easy to do, and having a guide by your side can be very helpful in those
Right.
circumstances. Yeah.
Yeah. I talked to somebody on a podcast once, and it might have been Kimberly Pope Robinson. But anyway, we were talking about how when you step out of the clinic and you become a different kind of veterinarian, how difficult that is because people still ask you what you do and you have to say, I'm a veterinarian, and then they expect you to like treat their dog. So, how did you go from being an ER doc into Hills and make that transition, that mental, that I was a veterinarian and now I'm a veterinarian, but it's different?
A lot of times people would ask me the question, so you're not a veterinarian anymore? And I would
Right.
always say, well, I am, and I'm licensed. I could practice in any practice today, and I
Sure.
just choose not to because I love to teach and I love to learn. And in this job, I get to do this and that and just explain what it is I do. And it's the same thing when I meet people on planes. It's so you're not a veterinarian. No, I'm still a veterinarian. I'm licensed. I could practice
Right.
tomorrow. It's just I'm serving the profession in a different manner.
Right.
And it's just really educating people on the many different options that we have as a veterinarian. So many things that we can do.
Yeah. And I think sometimes even veterinarians don't realize that, what they can do. They feel like they're stuck in practice, which one of my missions is to try to keep people in practice because I think you can have a wonderful life and be a practicing veterinarian. But I also know that it's not for everyone and that they have to have options and realize that they can be happy in the clinic and not in the clinic as well.
I
And it
think
sounds
that's
like
great
you learned that
advice.
early on.
I did. The first step is can you make what you're doing satisfying and can you be happy with what you're doing?
Right.
Let's look at that first. Because if there are some things in your practice, daily life, or what you're doing now, if we can help you with that, then stay. And if you've looked at that and it's like, this isn't where I want to be, then let's look at some of the other options out there for you. And because I've lived that before, sometimes it's really helpful to talk to somebody who's been there. And I
Right.
oftentimes get people calling me, asking about my career path, especially if they're looking at going from practice to industry or any other position as well.
Yeah, because you went from practice to industry to teaching to coaching, kind of that step by step. And teaching and coaching, I would argue, are fairly similar, not
Hmm.
exactly, but they're similar skill sets. But I love that. So is there more to the story? I don't want to switch topics if there's more.
There might be, but no, I'll let you ask the questions. There's probably more to the story. And yeah, so I'll let you ask the questions and we can go from there.
Okay, so one of my questions might be, because you're going into, you're in organized medicine, but you were in leadership positions at Hills, I'm assuming, because the veterinarians at Hills are usually leadership positions. Tell me what advice you give to people that want to be leaders, that feel like they're not natural leaders, and what do they need to do to embrace that skill set?
Sure. Well, I started out in veterinary school. I was the SCABMA president. Back then we
Oh,
called it
so you're a
SCABMA.
natural leader. You're one of those people
Well,
that just raises their hand when they need like I do that. Oh, we need
I
someone
had a
to
lot
do
of
X,
mentors.
Y, and Z. And I'm like, okay, I'll do it.
That's
Yeah.
me. Yes, I enjoy those leadership opportunities, servant leadership, the opportunity to give back. And so I started as a president against SCABMA. And when I went to Cincinnati, Ohio, I became the secretary of the Cincinnati Veterinary Medical Association, which became a bit of a challenge when I did ER work because we worked nights, weekends, and holidays. So I had to drop out for a while. And when I went to work for Hills, I actually became the district rep from my area. And then I took the position at Ohio State and had to move to Columbus and had to drop that. And during my time at Ohio State, I was too busy to even think about organized veterinary medicine. Teaching was really took all my time. I just didn't have time. Served on a lot of committees within the college and university. Then when I left Ohio State, I received a call to run for the district rep, of which I did, became the district rep. Then they asked me when I finished that to go up the leadership ladder and decided to do that. And our leadership ladder is secretary, vice president, president-elect, president, and then past president. So it's a 5-year commitment.
Right.
And I was delighted to say yes to that opportunity and run and win the election. And I'm in it now. It's a great opportunity to give back to the profession. I feel like I'm a better leader today than I was 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And you have to take on these leadership opportunities when the time is right. A lot of
Mm,
times I'll reach out to encourage people to run for board positions or district reps. And it's okay to say no because when I was working for Hills, I didn't really have a lot of time to do things when I was at OSU. It's okay to say no for the right reasons. If it's skills that you're lacking, there's many different opportunities to learn leadership. The uh, Actually, this Wednesday I'll be leaving for the Veterinary Leadership Conference in Chicago, and we'll have a multitude. Some of the leaders in the veterinary profession will be giving talks there. A great way for leaders, emerging leaders within the profession, to go get CE credit on some of the most important leadership topics, to connect with other people who speak and coach and consult, to connect with the leaders throughout the veterinary profession. And I always say, if someone thinks they can't be a leader, let's challenge that thinking and reframe it because we all have that ability. My goodness, if we got into veterinary school or wherever we serve in the profession, whether you're a veterinary technician, a practice manager, assistant, we can all. Leadership is a skill set that can be learned and
mhm.
practiced and given feedback in order to get better. I think I have a positivity attitude, and I think everyone can lead. It may be I start out by being the leader of a club or an organization in veterinary school. Then I take it to the next level and the next level. In my opinion, everyone can be a leader. It's just reframing the thoughts that stop you from being able to do that.
Right. I totally agree. And I think you can lead from wherever you are in the organization. If you're an associate veterinarian, if you're a practice manager, obviously it comes with leadership, position, but you can learn to lead from anywhere. And I totally agree with you. It's a mindset, it's a skill you can learn. Um, some people it comes easier to than others, which kind of leads into my next topics about personalities. But I really do think that, to not fear leadership. You can be a collaborative leader. You don't have to be super bossy. Some of us are more bossy than others. But it is something that you can learn, and it's very rewarding, I think.
Yes. And one of my favorite is, I mean, there's a lot of great assessments. No one is better than the other, whether it's
Right.
insights that Elenco does, whether it's Myers-Briggs or DISC. A leader has to understand their communication style and the communication styles of the people that they manage and that they work with. And that's just key. That's one of the things I always do with a coaching client is to do some sort of assessment so they can get an idea. Many of the veterinary schools actually do DISC or Myers-Briggs. I still teach Myers-Briggs at Michigan State. I used to teach DISC and Myers-Briggs at Ohio State. And it's important. It's an important leadership ability to understand that.
Tell people if they don't. I've done some podcasts on DISC and Myers-Briggs and things, but tell people if they don't understand what these things are, like, what are they basically, and why is it important, and what are we learning when we
I
do
think
these assessments?
I think the most important thing in particular for DISC is just to understand what your strengths are, what your challenges might be, and then to understand what are the different styles, behavioral styles within the organization, within the practice, with clients, and be able to adapt your style in a way that makes sense. It's really all about good communication. And that's the benefit, I think, of something like a DISC behavioral assessment. The Myers-Briggs, I think, is just another layer, giving you ability to understand, do I have a preference for introversion versus extroversion? And what does that mean in terms of my leadership? How do I see the world? Am I an intuitive or am I a sensing person? How do I make decisions, thinking, feeling, and how do I organize my world? Or do I have a preference for one dichotomy over the other, judging versus perceiving? And it helps me, instead of value judging other people, I can understand that's their style and I can communicate with them in a way that they understand and invite them to grow and see some ways that they can communicate better and differently.
Yeah, I've had some people worry that it puts them in a box, and I just think of it more as a way to learn about yourself. And then once you
Mhm.
figure out how you show up and understand how you show up, then you can start to understand others in
Yeah.
kind of in the same language. But it really helps you kind of fill the gaps, because like for DISC, if you're, D or an I and you're fast paced and you're not a real detailer, you need those other people in your hospital that can do the details, or vice versa.
Yeah.
And once you kind of figure that out and you realize that these people don't frustrate you because they are trying to frustrate you, they frustrate you because they're different than you. And once you get like, oh, now I understand why they're very detailed and very slow paced. It's because they're detailed and I'm
Hmm.
not. And just understanding that, I think is
Yes.
such a help.
Yes. Yes. And I'm careful on the language too. When I talk about DISC in particular, I talk about the D style or the I style or the S style or the C style. When I talk about Myers-Briggs, I talk about a preference of one over the other. And so I use
Right.
the preference. I
Yes.
agree. People say, well, that labels me. Well, here's the reality. Let's say that I brought you to the front of the room and I had your staff list adjectives about you. Chances are they would tell
They
me what
already
your disc
know.
style. Well, they would tell me what your disc style is based on the
Right.
adjectives they use. So the
Yeah.
nice thing about an assessment is it gives you a common language to use that's
Yes.
non-judgmental. I have to be careful how I use the language. So I always say D style, preference of MBTI style, things like that.
Yeah, I think because sometimes people think, well, if I'm high D or high S or high whatever they are, that's all they have. They don't understand that you have all the styles within you.
Yes,
Just
great
because I
point.
don't prefer to always be in the detail, and that's why I do the podcast the way I do. I like to kind of just have a good time with it. It's because
Free flow.
yeah, because I have the I style and I don't have all my questions pre-written and, but it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with the people that are very detailed. It's just different. And I
Hmm.
think understanding that, but I could be detailed when I'm doing surgery, or I can be detailed when I'm doing the books for my business. It's not that I don't have the C in me. It's just, I just don't prefer it. I don't like to be there for long periods of time. And
Excellent point.
yeah, it's so it's just getting to know yourself better, I think, and just putting a language to it that's so helpful.
Yes. Yes, I
Yeah.
like that. We have all styles within us, and we have to remember that. And we can
Yes.
raise our styles in different situations, and learning to be able to use that part of me that is helpful. I like to use the benefits or the good qualities of all the four styles.
Yes.
And that's the important thing to do.
Right. And it makes you appreciate other people and the styles that they prefer. I really, really appreciate having a high S receptionist because they just are wanting to make everyone happy and make sure the place is running smoothly. And, that makes my job easier. And so I
Mm.
think just understanding that is really helpful. So I'm excited that you use that a lot because I just love all personality profiling. Are there others that you like that you use? Because I know
Yeah,
there's
I
so
think,
many and I've studied a lot of them, but
yes, I use whatever. Sometimes people come to the coaching session already with a profile, whether it's insights, strength finders is another good one. And VIA character strengths is another good one. I always have people do their values to see how what they
mm,
do aligns with their values.
yeah,
And they all give you a missing piece of yourself. That's how come I think not one is better than the other. They
right.
all give you a missing piece of yourself. And I love that. I love to learn. I'm always trying to learn about myself and how I can improve, how I can be a better leader, a better communicator. It's a lifelong process. That's lifelong learning.
And I think that's so important to say because I think many of us feel like we have a long way to go or that we're not quite up with whatever we think the standard is. When you're very young, it feels like you're never going to catch up. And just the lifelong learning piece of it, knowing that no matter how far you get and how many things you study, there's still going to be more, I think is really kind of exciting if you like to learn. And I think many veterinarians do.
I would agree with that. Because if you're in a
Yeah.
profession, I think you have to love to learn in order to go to school as long as we do, and then to keep up with the journals and research and everything that goes on within the veterinary profession.
It's so hard, right?
Hmm.
Sometimes to keep all that up. So tell me a little bit about how you feel or how you use, I mean, it's a term, I guess, but like emotional intelligence. What does that mean to you and how do you teach it or use it in your coaching? I guess is a
Yes.
question.
Well, when I left Ohio State, I knew I wanted to focus on emotional intelligence. There was a somebody at the Wexner Medical Center, so they at the human hospital, that was teaching emotional intelligence and coaching physicians because a lot of their quality control was based on the performance appraisals that they would get from the I don't know the patients that were there. And so if someone was in trouble, they would do an emotional intelligence assessment and then take them through training. I did some classes with him and just loved it. I had a mentor early on in my training say, Michelle, if you want to learn a subject material, you go to the source, if the source is alive. And so the source of emotional intelligence, who made it popularized, was Dan Goleman, Richard Boyatzis. And I did an online class with Dan Goldman and certification, credentials, went to see him live in person at Omega Institute. Richard Boyatzis, who actually was the keynote last year at the Veterinary Leadership Conference, is a professor at Case Western. I took classes and got a certification from Case Western on emotional intelligence. So I feel pretty good about teaching that model. It's a competency-based model that Doctors Boyatzis and Goldman created about the 12 leadership competencies of exceptional leadership. And they've written and researched and continue to refine that. So that's the model that I teach. And it's the domains of self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. And kind of teaching the competencies within each of those domains. And that's pretty much the model that I use when I teach that.
Yeah. And why do you feel like it's important for people to learn?
Why do I think change can happen without some sort of an awareness or learning. And if I want to improve in anything, I have to figure out where I'm at and then learn the skills in order to become better and get feedback, hopefully good feedback to help me become a better leader.
Right.
And emotional intelligence is really one way to do that, to become a better leader. I think everything we do fits within the domains of emotional intelligence, self-awareness, self-management. And that's how come I named my company Lead Your Ship.
Right.
It's get your ship together because it starts with you and your well-being, what you think about all day long, and taking care of yourself in order to become the best leader that you can be. It starts with self. And not only self, but I have to, learn other skills as well. It
Sure.
starts with self.
And it always does. I think in anything you're trying to improve, you have to analyze what your hangups are, what your thoughts about it are. That's really it's at least I believe is the most important step is first know where you're at and then try to take those steps forward.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And
Yes.
understanding your own emotional intelligence and where you are in that journey. And yeah, it's a really interesting subject. And I know you can't go into all of it, but I think that if somebody hasn't been exposed to it, they really need to look into it a little bit. Where would you say someone to start? If someone said,
If
"Ooh, I
so,
want to learn about emotional intelligence."
there's a book called Emotional Intelligence 2.0 that I
Yeah, I was just
recommend.
thinking that. You read my
Yes,
mind.
I did read your mind. And the thing I like about that book, one is it doesn't cost a lot. What you do, you buy the book, and inside is a code to take a profile. So you do your emotional intelligence profile day one, you read the book, you implement it, and then 3 months later, you retake the test to see how far you've come. I think that's everyone can do that one. For people who are interested in teaching emotional intelligence, I think Case Western has some of the top leaders in emotional intelligence, Richard Boyatzis being one, Vanessa Druskat, Dr. Vanessa Druskat, who is a professor in New Hampshire. She's also faculty at Case Western. She's done a lot of work on team emotional intelligence and has a book coming out, I think this year. And
Mm,
what I learned from her, I used to think that if I taught a veterinarian emotional intelligence, that they would go back to their practice and elevate everyone around them. And to some degree, that's true,
right.
a
It
little
works
bit.
somewhat. Yeah.
You're one person. And so team emotional intelligence is really getting everybody on board. And I would say the most important thing I learned from her is that if say, for example, if we have a lot of gossip in a practice, which veterinary practices do, then our we have a model that that's okay to do that. And if so, we have to come together as a team and create a behavioral norm that says we don't do that. Not only do we not do that, if somebody does that, here's how we hold one another accountable. So if we don't create behavioral norms for our practice, the practice creates its culture itself. So I have to think about creating the culture with intention, creating behavioral norms in the practice that we don't do this. And if somebody steps out of line or does this, how do we hold them accountable? Holding them accountable is a key part of team emotional intelligence.
Yeah. And that holding them accountable piece is really difficult for people that don't like conflict or don't
Mhm.
like, I don't want to use the word drama, but there are a lot of people that just want to avoid all of that. So if you're one of those people that struggles with that, what's your advice to them? If they're in a
Well,
toxic practice or they're running a
sure.
toxic practice, like what's the answer to that, to getting better at
Well,
communication and
it
conflict?
sure. It's hard if you're not in a position of leadership. If you're the practice owner, you set the tone, you set the
Right.
culture. I would say, based on my experience, we are, if you look at the DISC styles, we're a heavily weighted S and C culture,
Yes,
S and C style culture. And
agreed.
many people avoid conflict. And that's just the way of it. And I would say, historically, I have avoided conflict too until I gain the skills
Right.
necessary. And I am never uh, shy of having a conversation with anybody about anything, including conflict. It's taken me a long time to get there, and it's one conversation at a time, as uncomfortable as it might be. Now, for me, conflict will never be like, oh, I'm so excited. It'll be, I'm a little uncomfortable. I'm going to have that conversation anyway. And it's about, I had the opportunity to do some training with Dr. Marilee Adams. She wrote the book, Change Your Questions, Change Your Life. I'm a chief question officer through her program. And she created this document called the Q Prep. And the Q Prep, I think about, let's say that I'm in conflict with you. I would do a Q Prep and it would involve these questions. One, what are my goals for this conversation with you? And I would write my goals down because oftentimes we don't take the time to think about the outcome that I want.
Right.
Then the
Yeah. It's
other
important.
questions would be, what assumptions am I making about you? Because oftentimes I say, don't die by a suicide. If I think you don't
I
like
like
me
that.
or that you don't want to get better or that you're this or you're that, I've got to challenge those assumptions. Then I have to look at what questions am I thinking with, meaning, what's wrong with them? Why are they acting that way? They're out to get me. And then I think about the questions that they might ask me. The best way to prepare is to think about the questions people might ask you. And then the last thing is to write down the questions that I want to make sure I ask that person. And if I'm prepared like that, which I do with a lot of coaching clients, they go into the conversation when we meet afterwards. They're like, I don't know why I waited 3 years to have that conversation.
Because it went so
And
well.
because it went so well and it accomplished so much.
Right.
I get it. I've been you. I have avoided
Sure.
conflict I just don't do it anymore because I understand the weight, the heaviness of this burden, conflict burden we carry around when we don't have conversations with people. But it's
Right.
preparation, preparation, preparation.
Yeah. And I would add to that maybe figuring out how you're feeling and trying to get the feeling that you need to get to that goal that you've set. Because sometimes if we don't control our own stress and our own anxiety about this meeting, we're not going to be able to show up as our best selves. And so when I go into a conflict coaching with someone, I'm like, okay, what do you want to accomplish? What do you want
Like
the
that.
end goal to be? And then how do you need to feel to get to that goal and stay? Like, what kind of mindset do you need to be in
Yeah.
so that you don't react or get defensive or get goaded into an argument, because we do this a lot with clients is we have to stay calm because if we don't, it doesn't go well. And I think we forget that we have to have that same kind of mindset when we're talking to someone that works for us or with us or, conflict resolution is a daily thing in most people's lives,
Yes. Every
you know.
day. Every
Yeah,
day.
even at the
No
grocery
matter
store
where you go.
sometimes.
Yeah, no
Yeah.
matter where you go, there's always something. One thing Dr. Adams created was the choice map, which is a visual representation of her work. And it goes along nicely with Carol Dweck's work on mindset, growth and fixed mindset. And
Hmm.
so according to Dr. Adams' work, the growth mindset or what we call the learner mindset is stimulation of the parasympathetic nervous system. The judger mindset is more of the sympathetic nervous system. And I
Right.
can change how I respond if I take time to prep, ask myself questions
Right.
such as, instead of why am I so stupid, which puts me down to the judger pit, uh, what's needed in this situation? How do I want to show up? What's possible if I engage you in this conversation? What's most needed right here, right now? That's pretty powerful work. And I love her work.
Yeah, it certainly is. And I think just keeping in mind that all of these things can be learned. It's all a process. We're all going through it. I still to this day don't always handle every conflict as well as I would like. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to say
Mhm.
things you probably wish you didn't. But But to be able to stay calm when it starts to go poorly is better because then you can kind of like bring it back sometimes and get,
Yeah.
I said something, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Let's turn it back rather than getting, you know, sucked into the high emotion and the anger or fear or whatever emotion that you have that isn't serving you
Yeah, I love that.
in
Yeah.
those situations.
Yeah. It's
So
that,
tell me, oh, go ahead.
no, it's that self-awareness piece. It's like, wow, I notice that my stomach is churning and I'm clenching my teeth and my fist. I'm getting ready to say something I will regret. Stop, Michelle, stop.
Yes.
It's like, take a deep breath, throw water on my face, and ask myself a different question. How do you want to show up right now, Michelle? Not like you were just about ready to respond. Yeah, I love
Right,
what you just
right.
said.
Yeah.
Yes.
And if you're a thinking person rather than a feeling person, it's probably going to be easier. Because if you're a high I and a feeler like me, a lot of stuff's going to come out of your mouth before you think. And
There
that
you
isn't
go.
always good. But you can still be successful, even with these impediments, I guess. I don't want to call them that because that's just a thought. But so what have I not asked you that I should ask you?
Yeah, I'll say a couple things. One is that my grandfather was a veterinarian, and as I mentioned, I wanted to continue his legacy.
Yeah,
He
I love that.
graduated he graduated 1922 from veterinary school, and
So
in
cool.
1935 he was president of the West Virginia Veterinary Medical Association.
Oh, cool.
In 2025, his granddaughter, me, will be president of the Ohio Veterinary Medical Association. So I'm pretty excited about that.
That's
Continue the
amazing.
legacy. Yes,
Yeah,
I'm
because when
very
he graduated, there were probably no women, would be my guess.
correct. No women in
Yeah,
his class, that's for sure.
right.
And yes, so it's pretty exciting to continue his legacy. I
Yeah.
guess the other thing I'd just like to say a few words about too is that, life happens as we're practicing, going through our journeys. And for me, in 2006, I was diagnosed with breast cancer.
Oh,
And
yeah, I
boy,
was going to ask you about that. I'm glad you mentioned it.
yeah, as I stand here and look back on my life, it's been this thread of cancer, beginning with my dog Bimbo, my desire to find a cure for cancer and become a veterinarian, and then coming or being diagnosed with breast cancer myself. And because of my veterinary background, I mean, of course, the people that helped me, Dr. Greg Ogilvie, a veterinary oncologist, Dr. Robin Downing, a veterinarian who knows a lot about oncology. There are people in my life who really helped me make the decisions that I needed to for myself at the time.
Nice.
And because of my decisions, I didn't need to have chemo. I had surgery, which was curative, so no chemo, and radiation wasn't needed as well. But it kind of set me on this path of giving back, becoming involved in Komen. I did the Komen 3 day. I always do the Komen walk
I
here
did
in
that too.
Columbus.
I did that in 2006. That's ironic.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Maybe we did it together. No, I think I did mine later than that.
Yeah.
2007, I believe.
Yeah, you probably
And
did.
in 2009, in Columbus, Ohio, there was this thing called Pelotonia that started, and I decided to ride for the first year. It's been going on for 16 years, and I've ridden every year since its start. So I'm one of
Very
248
cool.
riders. Yes, one of 248 riders, and it's interesting because I get interviewed a lot. But my message is always this: is that I became a veterinarian because of my dog Bimbo. I am a breast cancer survivor, and find a cure for all species, meaning that at Ohio State we have 7 health sciences campuses all in the same university, and so we're
Right.
likely, because of the collaborative research, likely to find a cure there. And most people not only know people with cancer, they've had a pet with cancer as well. And I'm on a mission. We don't have the cure yet. I will continue to write every year, to walk every year, and to help raise money and awareness about any type of cancer. And again, whether dog, cat, horse, cow, human, that's one of my missions in life, one of my
I love
purposes.
that. How many miles is the Peloton?
You
What's
can
that?
do you can do different rides. I usually do 50, except this
Okay.
year I got COVID and I had to back my mileage down to 20.
Yeah,
You can do
COVID would make it hard to do.
yeah. You
Yeah,
can do 20, 50, 100, 180.
I love
And this
that.
year they do a gravel ride, which is not something I would do, but a lot of people like gravel rides. I'm a road biker, and it's
That's,
an
yeah,
experience, not a race. So you go at a
right.
pretty slow pace, and you have frequent rest stops, so it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I love that.
We have
That's fascinating. Yeah.
we have a Peloton from the College of Veterinary Medicine, and I'm the co-captain, and have been the captain since the beginning. And we ride every year. Veterinarians, veterinary technicians, practice managers, alumni, friends of the college, all for one goal, and that's to find a cure.
Yeah. Well, and I think all of us have been touched by someone. I mean, my sister had breast cancer, my dad had pancreatic cancer, like
Mm.
cancer, I've had cancer. It's just like it's everywhere. And wouldn't it be nice if we could cure it? It's just so depressing. I've lost multiple dogs to cancer, different cancers. And yeah, it's something that we should all contribute to.
Yes, and congratulations on your survivorship too.
Yeah, well, mine was pretty easy. It wasn't I mean, it was a melanoma, but it was very superficial, but it's still scary when someone tells you you have melanoma. You're like, and my dad, I mean, my dad had pancreatic cancer and he's still alive. He had it when
Wow.
he was 63 years old and now he's 84.
Oh my
Or no, no,
goodness.
no. He's 86. He just turned 86.
Wow.
So he is
That's
a pancreatic
amazing.
cancer survivor, which is unheard of. And so I have total faith that someday, hopefully sooner than later, because I hate pancreatic cancer with a passion. So many people have been lost to it.
Hmm.
Um, a good friend of mine lost his wife to it, and it's just so many people, it's just terrible. And so many
Yeah, I
people
do.
get breast cancer.
Mhm. I do the Pancan walk because my sister-in-law, Peggy, my beloved sister-in-law, died of pancreatic cancer in 2015. And I have a
Oh,
classmate that's
the
dealing with
worst.
pancreatic cancer. Yeah, so I do that walk as well.
Yeah, yeah, I have a pretty good association with PanCan. So yeah, I love that. I love that you're so involved. I love that you give of your time and that you have a mission to cure cancer. I hope it happens
I
in
do
our
too.
lifetimes.
I do too. I do
Yeah.
too.
Seems like
Yeah.
why can't we cure it? What do you think the problem is?
I think cancer's pretty complex, and cancer shifts to various chemotherapeutic agents. It's a lot more complicated than even I can
Evolves.
understand.
Yeah, it evolves. Yeah.
It evolves. But we're further ahead today than we were 20 to 30 years ago. And some cancers have been cured. So we're on our way, and we're on our way.
I love it. Yeah, it's getting better, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. How did you deal with it emotionally? Was it
Well,
difficult?
I had great family support, um, and I I was covering Ohio State, so Dr. Jim Brand at Ohio State was helpful. I talked about the veterinarians that helped me with the decision. My mom, my dad, my family, just and the doctors. I was living in Cincinnati at the time, so that the doctors, the surgeon, just everybody was so supportive that my family, friends, just and a strong faith that really helped me understand and believe that I was going to be
You'd
okay.
be
I always say
okay. Yeah.
the best is yet to come and it's on its way. And so having a pretty strong spiritual faith and believing that the best is yet to come and being okay with
Yeah.
whatever the outcome was. But I had this sense that it would all work out okay. I just
Did
had a
you?
deep, yeah, I
Like
did.
deep
I did.
down, you felt
Deep down,
secure.
I
Yeah.
knew, I knew that it would be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I don't want to share all of this, but I think when you say it's the faith and the mindset, when my dad was diagnosed and he had his surgery, he told it's really an amazing story. There was a medical student that was on his case because he was at University of Michigan. And She was in her first year of medical school, but she was on his case. And she told me later on that he told her the day after his surgery that he would be at her graduation 4 years later.
Mm.
That's how confident he was that he was going to survive, which I don't know where that came from. And she told me that. So every year or every 6 months or so, she would check in with me. How's your dad? How's your dad? How's your dad? And I'm like, he's still here. He's still here. He's still here. Well, when she got to her graduation, she emailed me and she said, do you think your dad would come to my graduation? Because I never forgot that he said that to me. Because
Mm.
here he's doomed. They're telling him that he's not going to live. But he said to me, I'll be at your graduation. And she remembered it. And I said, yeah, if you invite him, I'm sure he'll come. And he did. He went to her graduation. So it's such a fascinating story that he was just like, yeah, I'm going to make it and I'm not going to die of this. And
That's
I
great.
mean, nobody would have bet. No, the doctors even, they're just like shocked that he's still around. And I'm like, people ask me all the time, how's your dad? I'm like, still golfing. He's still on the golf course.
That's great. That's
Yeah,
great.
it's crazy. Yeah. So I think the mindset, the faith, and just knowing that, you can't control it, but you can get through it no matter what it is. Even the people that don't make it, I think on some level, that's something that you have to think that there's a reason or something. I don't know. But anyway, so I'm glad to hear that you did well and that all is well and that you're surviving and striving. And I love the fact that you're doing all of this. Makes me want to walk the walk again. I haven't done it in a long time, but it was an experience.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, really awesome. So anything else that we need to say before we wrap it up?
Well, I guess I always like when I talk to people or coach people, I like for them to know that there's a lot of resources out there that in this profession you never have to feel alone. That
Right.
I have any veterinarian I've ever called for help, mentoring, coaching, ask a question has always been so glad to help. And I think you'll find that wherever in the profession, whether it's a
Mhm.
practice manager, veterinary technician, an assistant, owner, everyone is open to helping. I also like to point out resources that are available, starting at the national level. AVMA has tremendous resources, a phenomenal website for well-being. They have two well-being certification programs and then a train the trainer that trains on communication and well-being. I always promote those because people are always looking for ways to enhance their education, their learning, and to go to the source of AVMA is just great. Axon has a lot of great talks. Some are free and some that you can purchase. The state associations also have a lot of great programming too. The websites oftentimes are very good. And also, like you said, you were involved in Power of 10. I work with
Mhm.
Power of
I
10
love
in
Power of
Ohio.
10.
I do too. It's a great, I always encourage
So
recent
great.
grads so I do Power of 10 in Indiana, Ohio, and Washington. And it's a community that comes together again to gain leadership skills that last a lifetime. I encourage everyone to become involved in that. And suicide prevention training is also something that I'm passionate about as well. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
we started teaching suicide prevention at Ohio State in 2010. There was a university program called Reach, and the instructors came over to teach it in the college. And AVMA provides QPR training free to anyone in the veterinary profession. And why not do that? I got credentialed to teach suicide prevention. I teach it at Michigan State. And I'm just really passionate about that, encouraging people to be trained. We're not therapists, we're not psychologists. It's just a matter of reaching out to someone and asking them if they're okay and getting them
Right.
to the resources that they need to get to know that they're not alone and that we've struggled. And, part of when you asked about how did I get through cancer, well, I couldn't have done it without a therapist helping me see some
Right.
things that I needed to see. And
Hmm.
as I've gone through the loss of my mom, my dad, my sister-in-law, I've talked to someone. It's a strength to reach out and ask for help when you need it. And there's
Right.
not a thing wrong with seeing a therapist or counselor or psychologist. And many of the people I coach have me as a coach and also a therapist. I think it's
Yes,
wonderful
it
that people
is.
aren't afraid to get the help that they need. And yeah, big thanks to state associations and AVMA for providing so many opportunities for this type of well-being learning.
Yeah. And veterinarians are just lovely, lovely people for the most part. I'm sure, there's jerks out there. I worked for a couple of them, but for the most part, veterinarians are amazing people. And I think that if we remember that and we just keep looking for our people, whether it's in the state association or the national association or, a program like you have or I have, or if you just know if you're suffering that there are people that will get you the help. And it's not, I'm going to help you or you're going to help them. It's like we're helping them. It's this whole profession and the things that they're doing to try to make us less mentally ill, I guess is a way to put it, but just help us to process life because that's all it is. We all have the stuff, right? We've all lost our pets. We've all lost people. There's stuff, and you do need help to deal with it in most cases.
And need help with the skills that you need to acquire, the people that you need to talk to know that you're not alone and that other
Right,
people have faced similar challenges. And you can do that too. You can do the hard stuff too. We're here
right.
to help support you in a variety of ways.
Yeah, I love that. Well, that's perfect. I think that's a perfect place to end, don't you?
Sounds good to me.
I love it. Anything else we need to say before we wrap
Yeah,
it up?
I made
Tell
some
people where
notes.
they can find you. That's one thing I forgot to say. Tell them where they
That's
can find
okay.
you and your business and all of that. Let's do that first.
Sure. My business is called Lead Your Ship, and it's a title that just came to me one
I love it.
day after I meditated. I thought, well, how unique am I until I went to get the domain and saw that it actually belonged to a woman in Colorado who I called. And the reason she had the domain because her grandfather was the first African American to go to Antarctica with Admiral Byrd. She was going to write a book titled Lead Your Ship, and about a year later reached out to me, decided to go with another title, wondered if I would like to purchase the domain, and I did.
Oh, so it was meant to be.
It was meant to be. So leadyourship.com is my website, and you can reach out to me there either by phone or email.
That's awesome. All right, everyone. This is Dr. Michelle Harkey. I'm thrilled that you came on the podcast today, and hopefully we will meet again, and maybe we can do another podcast at some point if it doesn't sound like you have a lot of time to do podcasting, but you're
Well,
pretty
this
busy.
is a busy year being president and on the veterinary
Yes.
leadership
Yeah,
committee as
good luck with
well.
that.
Yeah, and I can always make time for you. I appreciate what you're doing, getting this information out to many people who wouldn't have a chance to listen otherwise. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been really nice meeting you, and I think we've probably met before. We said that before we got on the
I think
podcast.
so.
I'm sure we must have met each other before, but
At some
anyway,
meeting somewhere.
yeah, I'm sure at the AVMA leadership meeting or somewhere in the past over the years. But I really appreciate you coming on and imparting all the wisdom that you imparted to everyone that's listening. I appreciate it so
Great.
much.
Thank
All
you.
right, everyone, have a beautiful week. Bye. Bye, Michelle.
Bye bye.